No, mai hoki mai anō. Welcome back to Breakfast, coming up to 26 minutes past 8. So Wikipedia, we've all seen it, used it when we've gone to search something on the internet, but have you thought about who updates the free internet-based encyclopedia? Well, let me introduce you to one such person, New Zealand's Wikipedian Dr. Mike Dickerson, who is back at work on the West Coast making small changes to the Wikipedia pages of local attractions to bolster tourism. He's travelling the coast, uncovering the hidden treasures absent from the region's online encyclopedia, and he joins us now from 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶. Morena, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. How's the weather down in 𝗪𝗶𝗶𝗶𝗶? Is it rubbish like the rest of the country?
Not as bad. For a change, it's actually not as bad here as the rest of the country. It's just raining.
Well, go you and enjoy it. But Mike, how did you get involved with Wikipedia and updates? Let's start there.
Sure. Well, it started when I was living in Whanganui. I was a museum curator there. And I looked at the Wikipedia page about Whanganui, which, these are the days of just after Michael Laws. It was completely focused on gangs, of which there were actually not many. And I thought, this is a bit awful. What an awful public face for the town. So I organised a little volunteer meetup group in the library once a month where locals would come. We called it Wiki Wednesday, and would all try and make small improvements to that Wikipedia article. And I just realised this is so much fun. I felt I was doing something useful with my free time, and gradually started training up other people how to do it, and then ran some events, and finally got a contract to actually travel around New Zealand for a year, working with institutions who wanted to get busy with Wikipedia. And it's all just snowballed since then.
Gosh, that sounds fascinating. So the Wikipedian at Large project, is that what you're talking about in terms of the different hui that you've held to get people interested in doing what you're doing?
Yeah. Well, currently I'm living on the West Coast now, and this is my second short contract travelling around trying to improve the coverage of the West Coast articles. And there's, the not so ulterior motive is that people wanting to go on holiday on the West Coast, they're Googling their attractions, and if they see a really crappy Wikipedia article, they're going to think twice about wanting to stay for an extra night. But also it's about local pride. It's a bit embarrassing when you look at the Wikipedia article about your hometown and you see it's out of date or it's completely misleading, compared with articles in, say, the UK or the USA, which are usually pretty good. So I've been trying to get volunteers involved, train them up and turn them loose on improving Wikipedia.
So how's your little project going then? Have you managed to get people on board?
Yeah, we've got 10 volunteers working with me on this project. We've just, in a couple of weeks, improving articles around Punakaiki and created articles on the Paparoa track and beefed up the one on the Pancake Rocks. And I've just spent yesterday travelling around Lake Brunner, photographing all the little bays and rivers and mountains around there, because the Brunner article, last week, if you looked at the Lake Brunner article, it would basically say there's terrible water quality and nothing else. So I've been adding the history and the industry and tourism, and we're next going to work on the fishery and the flora and fauna of the lake, and trying to make it look a bit more representative of what's actually there.
This is a brilliant little project, and I imagine that you get a lot of satisfaction, a lot of pleasure out of doing this, because, as you say, when people go to Google something, and Wikipedia normally is one of the first articles or first sites to pop up, that actually you're making a positive contribution and looking at the good things that are in our country, right?
Yeah, and it's a volunteer activity, just the same way people put their volunteer time into trapping for pests or something. If you can't get out of the house, this is something you can do from home. And it appeals to the kind of people that like doing history and genealogy and writing and research. It's a really good way to spend your spare time, better than blobbing out in front of Netflix, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I look at some of the notes, and a new study has discovered that making small changes in Wikipedia can hugely increase tourist revenue for small cities and large towns. So who can actually contribute to Wikipedia?
Anyone actually technically can. Like, every article has an edit button up the top there, and you can click on that and start changing it, which you would think would be bonkers. Like, how can this possibly work if any random person can start messing with Wikipedia articles? But actually, there's a whole bunch of bots that correct for common vandalism, and there are human beings who volunteer their free time just to go and check new edits to make sure that no one's messing up the articles. And so I really have a lot of admiration for people who just try and fight vandalism all the time. But, I mean, it actually works. I mean, Wikipedia is one of these projects. It doesn't work in theory. It only works in practice. And in fact, the articles tend to be really good, long, accurate, well-referenced articles, except in some backwaters like New Zealand, where we don't quite have enough volunteers to keep up. That's why we're trying to really marshal the troops and improve our bit of the world. But it's a remarkable human achievement, actually, that this is something that people in their spare time over 20 years have created this massive encyclopedia for no profit. They don't run advertising. They do donations once a year. It's one of the last nice bits of the internet, I think.
Absolutely fascinating, and go you, Dr. Mike Dickerson. Go well in Hokitika on the West Coast. Enjoy, although I don't have to say that to you because clearly you already are. Appreciate your time this morning, Dr. Mike Dickerson, joining us from Hokitika. Thank you. Kia ora.
𝗪𝗶𝗸𝗶𝗶𝗶, here is your